now, without further ado, we present Albury and World War I virtual bus tour, featuring Doug Hunter and the Doug Hunter Players. May I introduce the creator of this show, Doug Hunter.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to everybody for joining us on this occasion. Recovering the Past was prepared for a series of bus tours arranged by Albury City Library Museum and the Albury District Historical Society to complement an exhibition staged at the Library Museum in 2025. So welcome on board. We visit 6 locations that have significance for Albury during the war 1914-1918. They are the former Town Hall, now part of Marma, Albury Railway Station, which was the rail junction between New South Wales and Victoria, but at the time the rail gauges differed, so everyone and everything had to cross the platform and board another train to continue the journey. Then Noriel Park, the War Memorial, St David's Church, and concluding at the former Methodist Church, now part of the police complex. At each location we hear stories about Albury and the war. There are 12 stories, and for something different, they are told by Albury residents of the time. When war broke out on 3rd of August 1914, Albury was remarkably well prepared for war. It had an artillery battery of 100 men, an infantry company of 130 men, and 330 cadets under the Universal Training Scheme. The community, however, was not in any way prepared for what the war would demand of it. Our stories tell of some of those demands and how the community responded. We likened our tour to a stage play. Each location is a stage set, and instead of the curtain rising and falling, we get off and on the bus. Our characters are Mayoress Ellen Waugh, young woman Francie Mudge, clerk-of-courts John Kingsmill, schoolboy Billy James, Red Cross President Flora Baker, Railway Refreshment Rooms Manager Hugh McCutcheon, Battery Sergeant Major Percy Pearsall, contractor Thomas Bartleson, young man Horace Stelling, an Army cadet, and then Scoutmaster Frank Brown and Captain Leslie Hewish. So from now on, you can think of me as the tour director. So sit back and relax as our story unfolds. Shakespeare wrote, "For all this world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. Land marked Albury as our stage, men and women of a century past, our players. Today between exits and entrances, stories will they tell of Great War Albury. Be our play tragedy or comedy, drama or romance, you, our audience, shall decide. Hush, I give you Town Hall Albury, timely built, a showpiece of civic pride, a facility of community usefulness. Flanked one side by courthouse, symbol of state power and assurance, and the other, Mechanics Institute, now ghostly edifice of aspiration and entertainment. The players emerge.
My name is Ellen Waugh. My husband Alfred was mayor, but the letter was addressed to me. It was from Lady Helen Munro Ferguson, the Governor-General's wife. And I think the same was written to mayoresses and shire presidents' wives across the country. Lady Munro Ferguson said thousands of men were arriving at training camps, but many came with nothing more than the clothes they stood up in. Tunics and boots the army could provide, but the men lacked other items of clothing. Lady Ferguson had just established the Australian branch of the British Red Cross, and she saw the organisation as a means to provide the sorely needed essentials. I placed an advertisement in the Albury Daily News inviting ladies to meet with me at the town hall to discuss the matter. There was excellent attendance. We formed a sewing group and arranged to meet at the town hall supper room, where we were able to set up cutting tables and sewing machines. We were in business. Very quickly, we were making and sending to Sydney pyjamas, shirts, flannel binders, handkerchiefs, housewives, and much else. What are housewives, you ask? Well, I have one to show you, but I left it over there. This is a housewife's, and it is made up of, it's a pouch, as you can see, and it contains needles, cotton, strands of darning wool, buttons, hook and eyes, everything for a soldier to make running repairs to their uniform. Essential items. In that first year, our items went to soldiers preparing to go overseas. But as war progressed, Red Cross focused its efforts onto providing items for the sick and wounded soldiers who were being cared for in hospitals overseas. It was a great thrill for the ladies when Mrs. Woods read a letter from staff nurse Alice Pritchard, writing from a hospital on Lemnos Island where they were looking after men from Gallipoli. Several things that I have to distribute to my patients have been marked Albury, and the supplies come regularly. Several thousands of our men are passing through our hospital, where we take any number up to 2,000. All are in tents, of course, both patients and staff, although now they are starting to build huts because the storms blow the tents down. Alice Pritchard had been a matron at the Albury Hospital before the war broke out, so many of us knew her. Lovely lady. She had been one of the first to join the Australian Army Nursing Service and sail overseas. I found it pleasing to see the Albury branch go from strength to strength. At the annual general meeting in August 1916, Secretary Mrs. Helen Aikins reported a membership 72. Sewing groups meeting at the town hall 3 times a week, a girls' sewing bee meeting on another evening, and 12 schoolgirls meeting at Mrs. Baker's home to knit bed socks. 92 pairs, I believe. All up, in 12 months, we have sent 18 cases of goods to Sydney. We feel we are doing our bit for the war effort.
I was disappointed when Mrs. Watson wrote and said that the leather jackets she planned to buy were too expensive, so she had brought gumboots instead. 600 pairs. So ordinary, I thought. Ye of little faith. Hi, my name is Francie Mudge. I work as a secretary at the Hume Shire office, and I am one of the Bilgem sisters. There are 8 of us. Nora Bevan and myself, the Cox sisters, Elsa and Enid, the Wood sisters, Marjorie and Mary, and Camille and Lila Tishan. This all started after the boys went away, and we girls thought it would be nice, instead of just writing, to do more to assure them that they aren't being forgotten. We didn't have much money, only a couple of us worked outside home, so we started a stall in the town hall vestibule. Tuesday mornings and Friday evenings selling donated jams and produce. We raised enough by Christmas to send £40 to Mrs. Watson in London. She made inquiries and used the money to open a canteen just behind the battery lines. It was called the Albury Canteen and was very popular. But we wanted to do more. What about putting on a concert in the Mechanics Institute? Someone suggested. We'd need help, but we were sure we could do it. The great day came with a rush. Before we knew it, we were backstage, waiting, shivering. We peeked out through the curtain. The hall was full, and it wasn't nearly starting time. Mr. Pogson's orchestra struck up the Light Cavalry March, then moved into a ragtime song. We burst onto the stage, singing. Our costumes were smashing, black satin skirts to the knee over pantaloons with frills and up to the ankles. Ruffles in pink, emerald, canary and red, and muffs to match. Balloons were released during the balloon song and floated down over the audience. The audience threw flowers to us on stage. We responded with bonbons. The lights dimmed and lit up again with the stage set for a comedy. The master of the house, the mistress, the cook, the housemaid. The master wanted to flirt. The mistress was suspicious and wanted to box her ears. Enid was supposed to be saucy, but she was outrageous. She was naughty. The crowd loved her. They laughed and cheered, and the naughtier she was, the louder they roared. The audience were collapsing in their chairs as the curtain fell. More singing, comedy and recitation in the second half. Encores galore. And when the concert finally ended, the audience rushed us with flowers and sweets. The stage looked like a florist shop. We were dropping. We had been on stage nearly 3 hours. But the audience wanted more. We had to autograph special souvenir programs, which Mr. Barclay Dowling of Young Husbands promptly auctioned. Outrageous sums were bid. Many pounds were added to the proceeds of the night. We were able to cable an amount of almost £400 to Mrs. Watson, and she brought gumboots. She wrote saying, "I'm sure you have made all the boys very happy. It is such a splendid effort on your part, and I have been happy and interested in doing my part." It sounded all right, but deep down, I think we girls had misgivings. Gumboots? Really? Then we received a letter from handsome Colin Kingsmill. Handsome Lieutenant Colin Kingsmill. "You should hear the 10th and 13th Battery folk speak of the Belgium sisters," he wrote. Uh-oh, we thought. They've heard about Enid's antics at the concert. But he went on. "All the men in each of these batteries got a pair of gumboots." Then a letter from shy Ken Kelton put our minds at rest. "Through the good work of the Belgium sisters, we have been provided with a pair of knee boots, which are absolutely the best comforts we have received from any fund up to date. Having dry feet is all the battle." The best comforts we have received? Dry feet, half the battle? We were thrilled. We had done well, and Mrs. Watson, bless her, had got it so right.
So what do spinning wheels have to do with Albury's war effort? Quite a lot, really. Well, a unique part anyway. My name is John Kingsmill. I'm Clerk of Petty Sessions. My office is in the courthouse. The story is not so much my story, but my wife Amy's. But in the fashion of the time, while a woman might write a speech or report, it was her husband who stood up and read it. Amy was invited to unveil the War Memorial at Gindra in May 1917. This was the first memorial to be installed anywhere in the district, Amy felt very honoured and humbled to be asked to officiate. The president of Hume Shire welcomed her and explained that her 4 sons were serving in France and that she had been a conspicuous worker for patriotic causes since the war began. Amy had prepared a speech in reply. I read it on her behalf. Our sons Horace and Kenneth went away at the beginning of the war. Our other 2 sons, Nigel and Colin, went the next year when the Albury battery went. In letters home, the boys in Egypt and later at Gallipoli mentioned how cold the weather was and how hard it was to get woolen socks. Amy began knitting. She contacted other mothers whose boys were overseas. A knitting circle gathered in a workroom at our house in George Street. Mufflers, balaclavas and of course socks were packed and dispatched to Sydney bound for Egypt. They added other things too: toothbrushes and paste, soap, combs, nuts, lollies, tobacco, ham paste and soup powder. On one occasion it was fly veils. These parcels from home to the boys overseas became known as comforts. It might be helpful to explain the difference between goods supplied by the Red Cross and those supplied by the comforts groups. Red Cross focused on wounded and sick soldiers in hospital. The comforts groups were often informal and focused on soldiers not in need of Red Cross help. There were overlaps, of course. Many ladies were active in both. There was one problem which concerned both groups: the shortage of commercially produced woolen yarn for knitting. The shortage was hardly surprising. The whole nation was knitting. What to do? Amy came up with a solution. There was plenty of fleece in the district. Why not spin their own yarn? She borrowed a spinning wheel from Mrs. Rice of Cumberuna Station near Weimar. It was 80 years old and of Scottish manufacture and had belonged to Mrs. Rice's mother. She readily agreed to loan it to Amy and her group. Who knew how to spin yarn? Fortunately, a Mrs. Burns from Henty did. She came to town bringing a bag of wool from her pet lambs and introduced the ladies to the mysteries of preparing, carding and spinning yarn. Amy's idea of spinning their own yarn was immediately seized on by the ladies at the town hall. Red Cross member Vera Burrows called upon her avid inventor husband, Percy, to build a spinning wheel. He did. In fact, he built 2, and he went a step further. He powered them with electricity. Local graziers made sure the spinners were never short of wool. Just before Christmas in 1916, Amy and her women received a letter which boosted and confirmed their efforts. Major Shelshear, who was in charge of the Albury battery in France, wrote it, and verbatim I will quote it. Dear Mrs. Kingsmill, just a short note to thank you and all the good people who sent things to the lads. The 3 cases arrived safely. It is always a sort of gala day when the goods arrive. The division is quite a raffle. Each article is put on a slip of paper and each name and everything is drawn for. Then you may afterwards hear say from Brown and Jones, "Oh, Jones, what about a tin of toothpaste for a cake of soap?" Or old Robertson bartering a pair of socks. Albury has much to be proud of in the lads of this battery. I don't think it could have been possible for them to do better, and it would be difficult to single any out specifically. They have made my work easy for me by their continued and loyal support at all times, and they have seen something since they left. I can tell you, the Somme was no picnic. Once more, thank you on behalf of the 13th Battery. The load on Amy was eased when a group of young women started a stall to raise funds for comforts for the Albury boys. They worked with Mrs. Watson from Gerodgery, who had travelled to London and was working with the institutions supporting Australians, especially when they were on leave. In August of 1917, Canon Bevan arrived at our home in George Street. Our son Horace had been killed. Amy was devastated. She withdrew from almost everything. She was anxious for the other boys. A break in letters and she would write to Army headquarters asking if she had their correct addresses. The army would reply saying yes, but a couple of months would go past and she would write again. Gradually she resumed her comforts work, but the anxiety never left her.
Our bus awaits. We travel on in space, but not in time. We are like to see Railway Station Albury, bastion of colonial pride, temple of industrial power and communication, qualified joining place of interstate rivalry and utility. Alas, the gauge of rails differs. One train ends, the other begins. Albury, all change, all change. I remember her as if it were yesterday. It was the day I came running up to the railway station from the public school, careful not to spill my little tray of buttons. My name was William James. I was 11 at the time. My dad was secretary of the Red Shield Day Appeal. The platform was crowded when I got there. People were milling around, shuffling cases and bags between trains. There was a lady wearing a hat and gloves. She was standing back while others moved her cases. I went up to her and I said in my loudest voice, "Please, miss, would you like to buy a button? It's for the YMCA." I held up my tray of buttons with the distinctive red triangle. "What's your name?" she asked. "Billy James," I said. "It's for the YMCA." "Yes, I'll have one," she said. "Would you like me to give you £1 for it?" £1. I could hardly believe my ears. My whole tray might fetch 5 shillings, but £1 for one button. As you can imagine, I was struck dumb, and as I stood there, the lady took out her purse, and as she opened it, she pointed to a man nearby holding a case and said, "Give that gentleman one also." And she handed me not one, but 2 crisp pound notes. I was left clutching more money than I had ever seen in my life, and trying to stammer, "Thank you," as Dame Nellie Melba boarded the train to continue her journey. Later I learned that during the First World War, the Young Men's Christian Association, YMCA, took caring for the recreational, social and moral welfare of the troops as its role. It went everywhere the AIF went. It set up huts and marquees in the camps and behind the lines, the famous Red Shield huts. It provided stationery, reading materials, sporting equipment, games, gramophones and much else. By the end of the war, it was estimated 90% of the letters home were on YMCA stationery or written in a Red Shield hut. It was supported by public fundraising, hence my sale of Red Shield buttons.
Wartime letters are often a game of make-believe, certainly between a mother in Albury and a son on the Western Front. My name is Flora Baker. My husband Charles is manager of the Albury branch of the Bank of New South Wales. My 21-year-old son Charles Jr. is serving with the 1st Artillery Brigade in France. I am president of the Red Cross branch. When trains carrying the wounded began coming, we were invited to assist with distributing meals and drinks to the soldiers while the change between trains took place. When word of a train became known, people with relatives on that train took the opportunity to see them. Soon, however, more people came, some just to wish the lads well, some seeking information about dead and missing relatives. They looked for someone from the same battalion. The platform became crowded, hindering the movement between trains and the distribution of food and refreshments. This became even worse when people took the opportunity to bring and distribute bottles of beer. Restrictions were put in place. The station was closed to all except relatives who could get a pass signed by the mayor at the town hall. This made life easier. We were even able to send some of the nurses away to nearby hotels for a bath and freshen up. We had a couple of cars standing by just to do that. The patients were unfailingly cheerful. There was a general feeling of, I'll be all right, soon be as right as rain. As we move among them handing out Mr. McCutcheon's sandwiches, they lose a little of their shyness and chat as one might around the kitchen table. 3 teas here, Mrs. Adkins. Don't worry, boys. Mrs. Woods will be here with more sandwiches in a moment. Yes, I know Canon Bevan. You were with his son in France? That is lovely to know. I will tell him. How many spoons of sugar? Just as many as you like. There is plenty. You are home now. Who has rolled the best one-handed cigarette I'm asked to judge? I think that one. What? Why is it unfair? Oh, you were right-handed before you lost your arm. Much laughter. Once more, dear friends, once more we encourage each other on nights when there are multiple trains. That terrible night when we had 6 trains and 710 patients, none of us will forget. All so young, so badly damaged, so many stretchers. Almost all our ladies have someone serving overseas. We don't talk about it, but I think we have all had the experience of seeing a son or a brother, husband even, somewhere along the platform, a bandaged, maimed figure. One knows it can't be, but for just that moment, it is a shock. When the train is gone, I go home and I reread the latest letter from Charlie, a letter full of good cheer telling of the antics when helping the girls milk the cows at the French farm where they're billeted. I will answer with a story of fun, teaching giggling schoolgirls to knit socks, and the laughter when one holds up a misshapen creation. He doesn't need to know I visit the Western Front every time a hospital train comes through.
My name is Hugh McCutcheon. I'm the manager of the railway refreshment rooms at Albury Station. You ask if I knew Joseph Kennedy. Alas, poor Joe, I did know him. He was a porter here at the station before the war. Nice young fellow. He was only 19 when he went away. Sad story. I knew his mother too. Well, she was his aunt, actually, Margaret. Joe was doing his compulsory training with the Albury Battery round there at the drill hall in Victoria Street. He would come in on a Monday morning, keen to tell everyone about the weekend with the guns and the horses. He was into the drill hall to join the AIF as soon as the call for volunteers was made. He was one of the first. The rest of the battery waited to be called up as a training battery, but Joe couldn't wait. he wrote to me from Gallipoli. "I'll give you the menu for the last 3 days to show you how we are managing here," he said. And he did. Bacon and eggs, bread and jam for breakfast, herrings and tomato sauce for dinner, and so on. He knew I would be interested. I didn't hear much more for some time. Then his mother told me Joe was in France and having a good time. He'd been promoted to sergeant. Then came some bad news. Joe had been wounded at a place called Posse something. Seriously wounded, but he was doing okay. He was in hospital in England. Then, more news. Joe had a bullet in his spine and was paralysed and was being sent home on a ship. They put him in hospital in Randwick. His mother was able to go up to Sydney and see him. Joe wasn't good. He died a couple of hours after she had spent time with him. Sad, but I suppose not many young fellows got to see their mother before they died. Did I mention Margaret was Joe's aunt, not his real mum? After his death, the authorities wrote asking for details of his real parents. This is some of a letter Margaret wrote. He was an illegitimate child and was raised from birth by his grandmother. He was a young boy at her death, and my husband, he being the oldest son, took the boy and we reared him as our own son, with our own children, and he had no other home. He enlisted, and the poor boy made his will in my favour, as I was his mother more than an aunt. Sad story, but just one of so many.
Call me Percy Pearsall. Battery Sergeant Major Percy Pearsall. 13th Battery, 5th Field Artillery Brigade. Where am I and what am I doing? I am in the wagon line, surrounded by horses and wagons and ammunition limbers near the village of Noriel, France. What am I doing? I'm counting shots. I do it every time our guns are in action. Our 4 guns are in the gun line about half a mile ahead. I can tell to within a few shells how much ammunition our guns have. You see, ammunition resupply is my job. How can I tell our guns from the others in the gun line? The same way you can recognise a friend's voice in a crowd. Every gun has its own cough, crack, grunt. Even every crew has its own signature, the rate of fire and the sequence of fire. I can hear our guns in my sleep. And that's where I heard them this morning. It was just before dawn when suddenly away they went, the whole gun line. Bang, 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 bang. Our guns were going hard and I was counting. There was a stunt on. The fire on the right of the line slackened and then stopped. Now that was puzzling. Then it became lighter and we could see movement, groups of lads falling back. Some of the gunners were carrying their breech blocks and gun sights. They've broken through. We've lost the guns, someone said. But still no word from our 13th boys. They were still firing, but something had changed. Guns are normally in a gun pit, a shallow hole in the ground with sandbags raised around the sides. This gives some protection to the gunners from enemy shells. When the gun is in the pit, the sound it makes is a sort of a muffled cough. Well, when it's in the open, an 18-pounder has a very sharp crack. And that's what we were hearing now. Crack, crack. Now that wasn't good. Everybody in the wagon line heard it. Jack Wilkes had his teams harnessed, ready to dash forward and pull the guns out if needed. Good man, Jack Wilkes. I had 2 limbers, 40 shells in each, harnessed, drivers mounted, ready to go at a moment's notice. Would they get through? Were the Germans between us and the guns? Would the guns run out of ammunition if they didn't go? Our reserve infantry were pushing up, so it was a risk worth taking. And away they went, the horses all wild-eyed, the drivers crouched over the horses' necks, yelling to calm them. The iron-wheeled limbers bouncing over the rough ground as the teams eased into a gallop. And they got there. Things settled down a bit after that, and by late morning the Australian frontline positions and guns had been recaptured. Young Billy Mongan, a lad from Staghorn Flat, had been with the guns that morning, and this is what he wrote in his diary. 15th of April. Germans attacked before dawn with a force of 6,000 men on our right, breaking through between the 2nd and 3rd Brigades. They captured Larnacore and 68 guns, all of the 1st Division artillery. Reinforced by the 5th Brigade infantry, we counter-attacked. Our guns were dragged out in the open and did good work among the massed Huns. The 17th and 20th batteries did splendid work. Also the machine gunners who got direct fire on the enemy. 4 machine guns flew very low during the stunt, carrying back messages to the infantry. Also turning their machine guns on Fritz. The situation for us seemed a bit uncertain for a while, but once the Germans found they were being surrounded, they surrendered in hundreds. Of the 6 battalions that came over, less than a third got back. If you're wondering where my hastily delivered loads of shells and more following up, seems Major Ray had 1 gun dragged way out in the open where he could keep up fire on the withdrawing Germans. Kept it there for hours and stood beside it and pointed out the targets. Fired off the lot. Damn dangerous, damned effective. Damn good man, our Major. Old Rusty, the boys call him. Not in my hearing, of course. I'm Battery Sergeant Major.
Hello, it's Ellen Wall again. I spoke to you at the very beginning of the war. It's now the end. Husband Alf came home from a council meeting perplexed. Council was involved with beautifying a piece of parkland beside the river, an area known as Bean's Bath, which had been a popular swimming spot since the 1860s. Workmen were mainly ex-servicemen, and the project was financed by the government grant obtained by council. The grant made it possible to increase the recreation area. The ground had to be levelled, humps flattened, depressions filled, and Morse's Creek had to be diverted and made to flow into the river well before it reached the swimming area. The work was no problem for men who had spent the last 4 years digging up France. So what troubled Alfred? It was the name. So many had been suggested. Anzac Park, AIF Park, Victory Park perhaps. Those names will become so hackneyed, he said. I want something distinctly Albury. Well, what could be more Albury than the Battery? I suggested over breakfast next morning. Ask them. He was home a few days later, happier.
I did as you suggested, love. I asked the Battery fellows what they thought, and after a lot of discussion they came up with a name. Initially they were leaning towards Mont St Quentin. That apparently had been an exciting time with the guns right up in the infantry line. But then they turned to Nouriel. Ah yes, Nouriel, the German breakthrough. Surrounded, old Major Ray ordering the guns out of the pits. Point blank fire to keep Fritz back. For a moment they were reliving it, the fear, the thrill, the seriousness. They were back in France. If we'd folded, Fritz would have rolled up our whole line. We never would have got out. But we hung on, we stood to the guns and just kept firing. It was their finest hour. I needed no further convincing. Nouriel Park will be forever distinctly Albury.
Albury, once linked by Surveyor Townsend to a long disused crossing place, now splendidly anchored between treed hills, one of which features in our tale. No curtain can conceal this architectural gem, this positioning triumph, centurion tribute to all who served, sepulchre for those who did not return.
Dray loads of gravel and sand, barrels of cement, bundles of steel, bars from the railway station, water carts from the river. All of this brought slowly up the bare hill overlooking Albury. There had been other options suggested for a memorial to the men, and the women who served in the war, but Albury wanted to do something special. Albury had done something special right throughout the war. My name's Tom Bartleson, contractor, specialist in the use of ferro-concrete construction, which is concrete with steel bars for reinforcing. I won the contract to build the Albury War Memorial on Western Hill. It was a long time getting to this stage. With the excitement of the end of the war, other things became urgent. The memorial became a foster child of silence and slow time. I have done other ferro-concrete work in Albury, but this one is different. It's not like a bridge or a wall, say. It's a column, 100 feet high. The column is hollow. It's like building a well, but going up, not down. And it tapers as it goes up. We must make formwork, mix the concrete, and shovel it into the form, all the time keeping the steel bars in place. Then we wait a day, loosen the formwork, and lift it up to pour the next stage. We have to adjust the form a bit each time we lift because of the taper. We need scaffolding now and a hoist because the concrete has to be lifted from the ground up in buckets. The whole thing is Mr. Harrison's design. He tells me it's a very modern architectural style called arts decoratifs. It comes from Europe and uses clean, cut lines and shapes. None of the frills and decorations we're used to. Arts decoratifs. Being a French term seems somehow appropriate to me, the war being there and all. And I tell you another thing. Seems one of the first engineers in Australia to use ferro-concrete was John Monash. Yes, the very same John Monash. That was before he became a general or a sir, before he was famous. For days now, there's been a fellow from council, Creasy his name is. He's been walking around, getting under our feet, says he's working out where to put the lights so people can see the memorial at night. The lights will be connected to electricity. This electricity is such a novelty that they can't wait to find new things to connect to it. He says it will be the first war memorial to be lit up at night anywhere in Australia. Hook up our concrete mixer, that's what I say, or get out of our way. As I said, this memorial has been a while coming. The first meeting about it was held in 1918, a couple of months before the war ended. There were three things the meeting decided. One, whatever form it took, it was paid for with money raised from the public. Two, it should be for the district. And three, it should commemorate all who served, not just those who had not come back. The idea cooled following the wars, following the end of the war, and men before monuments became the policy. The needs of returning soldiers, repatriation, caring for widows and children, orphans in some cases, pensions. The Red Cross was busier than ever. Huge efforts were made to set up a club for returned men with club rooms in Dean Street. That worked for a while, about 2 years, then it folded. It just did not fill the need somehow. The Women's Committee, who had worked so hard to set it up, were disappointed. What sort of club did the men want? They pondered. Truth be known, I don't think they knew themselves. It was nearly 4 years before the idea of a memorial was raised again. This time people were ready to act. There were dozens of ideas, and it came down to a new wing at the Albury District Hospital in Wodonga Place, memorial gates at Dean Square, and the Western Hill Monument. The last one out, Lewis Harrison's design with a few modifications to lower the cost, went to tender, and our price was accepted. Contract signed in August 1924. We started work with a completion date of 25th of April 1925. 8 months. Look out, I said to Bill Murray, my leading hand. This is going to take some doing. You just can't rush concrete. I had a meeting with Mr. Harrison yesterday. He comes almost every second day to admire our progress. We walk round and talk cement, steel, gravel and water. He seemed particularly pleased yesterday, excited almost. As he was going, he looked over and he said to me, "Mr. Bartleson, Tom," I think that's the first time he'd called me that, "we are building something unique. Just think, in 100 years' time, people will still look at it and remember the men and women who went, and especially those who didn't come back." You know, I like that because my boy Harry didn't come back.
Harrison's bold prediction, Bartleson's hope. 100 years hence, will some still look and remember? Who knows? Do we? This edifice of sorrowing families, this place of consolation, comfort and care, seat of cruel called clergy, scarce forgiven messengers of interrupted mortality and conflicted fields. It was the best of times. Glowing reports of Allied successes filled the newspapers. Attack in Amiens sector, triumphant advance, scores of villages taken, enormous booty and armies of prisoners, said the Border Morning Mail. And it was the worst of times. The grand victory came at a heavy cost to the St David's Church community. 3 young men were dead and 3 families were grieving. We held a memorial service on Sunday 22nd of September for William Cleland, Arthur Mason and John Sutherland. My name is Horace Stelling. I played the organ. Reverend Fleming conducted the service and delivered the sermon. Weeks earlier, it had been his melancholy duty to call on the families and give them the sad news. What a difficult task has befallen the ministers of religion since the beginning of the war. Whereas families are notified by telegram that a loved one has been wounded, they learn of a death from a local minister who calls to deliver the sad news. As one can imagine, throughout the town, there is an unspoken fear of opening the door to find the minister standing there. What words could Reverend Fleming have for Annie Cleland, who had been married only a month before her 24-year-old husband William had sailed away? What words for Ina and Peter Sutherland, telling them that a second son, 29-year-old Jack, was dead. 21-year-old Ben had been killed in 1916. All thoughts of the boys returning to take over the Thullagalong farm were dashed. How did Reverend Fleming bring the news to Theo and Mary Mason that the 19-year-old whom they had farewelled at the beginning of the war was dead? This is not an enviable task, but one to which the local clergy do willingly. Canon Bevan from St Matthew's, Reverend Tonkin at the Congregational Church, Methodist minister Reverend Losby, Father Slattery of St Patrick's, and Adjutant Jury of the Salvation Army. All see this as their duty, but how hard it must be. I remember Arthur Mason, tall fellow. He was in the battery with Joe Kennedy. They went away together at the beginning of the war. So sad for his family. He had got through Gallipoli unscathed and had survived nearly 3 years in France. But now we are holding a memorial service for him. Oswald Steele was another who had gone away early. He was a teacher at the public school. I knew him through the Albury Philharmonic Society. He was the conductor of the choir section. I remember the gathering that we had to wish him well before he left. His wife was with him. It was the first time I had met her. Not married long, I don't think. We presented them with a rose bowl as a memento. Sadly, he, Les Hewish, and Horace Kingsmill were all killed within days of each other in the battle for Passchendaele. I thought the service was a meaningful one. The choir, under the watchful eye of Mr Monaghan, sang well and complimented Mrs Burrow's rendition of Goodnight Beloved. After Reverend Fleming's address, Percy Pogston played the last post. I thought my selection of Scottish airs on the organ at the end of the service maintained the melancholy and dignified mood. I hope so. Seems so little.
We cadets assembled at the drill hall early and marched to St David's Church for a special service on Sunday the 26th of May 1918. The organ was playing when we filed in, some seats reserved for us, but we had to squash up because the church was packed. The mayor, Dr Woods, was there, and a lot of gentlemen and ladies I didn't know, but they were obviously important. There were officers and sergeants in uniform too. Our boss, Major Butcher, was there, and Colonel Wilkinson, who used to call in to see us at the drill hall from time to time. Sergeant Whitehouse was there too. I'd seen some of the others, but I didn't know their names. There were a lot of grammar school boys in their blazers. The service started with some hymns and Bible readings, and the choir sang, and a lady sang a solo. Then the minister, whom some of the boys knew, Reverend Fleming, spoke from the pulpit. He spoke about things from the Bible reading, and he quoted a poem by Kipling. I knew about Kipling from reading Kim and the Jungle Book stories, but I didn't know the poem he was saying. He also read something Sir Walter Scott had written. I knew him too because I had read the book Ivanhoe at school. Reverend Fleming then spoke about Lieutenant Colonel Simpson, MC. That stands for Military Cross. We all knew about Colonel Simpson. He had been commander, of the cadets before the war started. We all remembered him at the drill hall, but we were all young cadets then and didn't have much to do with him. He went away right at the start of the war and took with him a lot of the older boys who had finished cadets and were in the militia, 44th Infantry Company. Les Hewish and Frank Maloney were two I knew. Colonel Simpson was at the landing at Gallipoli, and it was there that he was awarded the Military Cross. We heard that he had crawled through the scrub right up to the Turks' trench, then stood up and led his men forward to capture it. Colonel Simpson had come and talked to us cadets at the drill hall while he was homesick from Gallipoli. And we had read his story about what it was like at Gallipoli when it was printed in the newspaper. We knew he had gone away again with a new battalion. He was killed by a shell in France at the beginning of 1917. When the minister had finished speaking, he introduced the headmaster of the grammar school, a Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson released a flag from the wall of the church to reveal a white marble panel. From where I was sitting, it was hard to see what it said. Later I got a better look. It said, "To the glory of God and in loving memory of Lieutenant Colonel J.W. Simpson, MC, who was killed in action in France, 21st of January 1917. This tablet was erected by the principal, present and past pupils of the Albury Grammar School." I couldn't read the rest of it. Colonel Simpson had been a teacher at the school for about 10 years before the war. He was married and had one small son. Some of the boys remembered seeing him play football. He was captain of St Patrick's when they won the premiership in 1911. Next year he played for Albury. We stood at attention while Mr Pogson played the last post. The organ was still playing when we filed out of the church and marched back to the drill hall and dismissed.
The choice is yours. Board our bus and drive, or walk to the setting for the final act, the former Methodist church, now part of the police complex. Bricks and mortar repurposed, glassed memories of loss and war remain, but seldom seen. Other memories also sustain, which celebrate the power of the pen.
In October 2017, Albury City Library Museum was offered a collection of letters written during the First World War. Those letters were carefully unfolded from their original envelopes, transcribed and made available in digital format on the Library Museum database. They are available for all to read. An official launch of the work was held on 5 October 2017, which was the centenary of Leslie Hewish's death in Belgium. This is the address given at the launch. Between 1914 and 1917, two young Albury men, Leslie Hewish and Frank Brown, exchanged letters. They were wartime letters, Hewish serving overseas with the AIF and Brown here in Albury and ruled medically unfit for military service. Their common interest arose initially out of the Methodist Church, which both families attended. Brown kept the letters he received, 32 in number, and today, through the generosity of Frank's granddaughter, we have those letters in the Albury City Library collection. The Brown-Hewish letters are a conversation of which we can only hear one half. However, it is easy to follow the construct of the dialogue. It is a fascinating and intriguing conversation because it takes place between two worlds, between the old world of Europe and the new world of regional Australia, between a changing world of war and an unchanging world of everyday life in Albury, between worlds 16,000 kilometres apart in distance, and more importantly, months apart in time. Somewhere in France, April 8th, 1916. Dear Frank, very pleased to receive your letter dated 15 February. We have got into cool weather here, again, I can tell you. These different worlds needed description. Hewish describes his experience in battle. He describes his billeted in a French farmhouses behind the line. He describes life on leave in Britain when he visits relatives, especially young women cousins of his own age. He describes the more comfortable aspects of his life as an officer in contrast to the harder conditions of his men. But he also describes the occasions when his duty as an officer requires him frequently to leave the comparative safety of a dugout to go around the posts where his men are deployed. Brown is a reminder of life in Albury, a world Hewish now shares only through these precious letters. The Albury Gasworks in Kewa Street, where Brown works as a bookkeeper while studying to be an accountant. Are you working at your exams, old son? Make the best of your time in that way. Hewish admonishes him.
Hewish wrote to him about the embryonic Boy Scout troop, which Frank Brown has formed. You know you can't enlist, then continue on the good work you are doing among the boys. Help them to live healthy, manly and upright Christian lives, catering for their needs and continuing that good, solid training. And call at Blake's busy book bazaar and ask Elsie, that's Hewish's sister, for a donation out of my bank account for the good of the club. Happenings at the Albury Methodist Church are also of interest to Les Hewish. Your letter is dated the 21st of October. Fancy it being written on choir practice night. Why, tonight is Thursday, but it would be rather cool here, waiting at the church, and no Miss Hollands to go to for marzipan. Frank Brown's new interest in learning to ride a motorcycle excites Hewish from the front. So glad that you have learned to ride the motorbike. It's a good thing, and après la guerre, as the French say. You and I will have to have a motorcycle and sidecar, I reckon. I'd love to be able to pinch some of the dispatch riders' machines here and go for a spin on these lovely roads, or else sneak into the driver's place in a staff car and gently depress the pedal and just sail along. And as might be expected of young men, the subject of romance comes up. Frank Brown's attachment to Leila Callaghan comes as a surprise to Hewish. I did rather get a shock when I read Father's letter and later on your letter telling me about Leila. Oh, Frank, why ever were the fair sex ever brought into the world? They are always worrying us in one way or the other, though they give us a mighty lot of pleasure. Hewish was already seeking Brown's help to quash a rumour about himself and a girl to whom he was writing. There is one thing, however, still worrying me, and that is that the rumour of me being engaged should still be believed. I am a jolly fool, there is no doubt, but nothing was ever done or said by me that could convey that meaning. So, old son, anything you can do to settle such rumours, I will thank you for muchly. Of course, I'm still a friend of Annie, but nothing more. Sometimes the worlds collided. Won't it be fine when we can continue those moonlight trips? I often think on some of these lonely nights that it'd be much more pleasant riding out on the bikes than it is to walk round visiting posts with a loaded revolver in your hand and 2 Mills grenades in your pockets, where you won't know whether the next chap you see will be a Hun or one of your own men. Battlefield experiences feature in only a few letters. They are graphic when they do. Don't read any more of this unless you are prepared to tell it to no one. At any rate, to no one by whom it could reach the ears of father and mother at home. For I've got nothing to write about if I don't write some of these things, and there's no need for them to know them. Well, we went up to relieve one of our officers and sections at dawn one morning. That is about 2:30 a.m. We had an open road which led up to Poziers village to walk on for a few minutes. And as soon as we got onto it, saw the bodies of 3 poor beggars who'd just before been knocked out with a shell. Well, we left the road and entered what was officially known as a communication trench, but which really was a track through shell craters, many of which were 15 feet deep and some very much more. That does not sound bad writing or reading in cold blood, but when it is pitch dark except for flares, rain is drizzling down just enough to keep the ground greasy, and telephone wires are run along and across the track all over the place, besides dead Huns and Australians right across the path and every few yards, the stink of which nearly suffocates you, shells are dropping all round you, and the men are all loaded with guns, water and rations. Well, it isn't exactly pleasant. At last we got settled into the bottom of the trench where the guns were, but between the guns it was awful. No trenches whatsoever, and in my rounds I was continually falling over dead men who had been there perhaps 3 weeks. Hang it, I must knock off writing in this strain, or I'll be as nervous and shaky as anything by thinking of these things. In his remote world of war, Les Hewish clung to the normality of Frank Brown's world through the exchange of letters with his pal, his chum, his friend. "Write often," he scrawled in large letters across the bottom of one. On the 5th of October 1917, 23-year-old Captain Leslie Hewish was killed during the Battle of Passchendaele. He is remembered in a stained glass window in the former Albury Methodist Church, now part of the police complex, and in the green and brown of the 1st Albury Scout Troop scarf, his battalion colours. Frank Brown is also remembered at the 1st Albury Scouts by the Frank Brown Rover Scout Den in Mitchell Street. And in this collection of letters, preserved and presented by the Albury Library Museum staff, we not only remember these 2 young men, we know them because we have become part of their conversation.
Players take their leave. The curtain falls. The house lights blaze. Our audience rises to depart. Perhaps a different audience from that which entered in. Farewell.